Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to our next speaker, Mr. Mboneni Stanley Mulaudzi. He'll be taking us through the use of blended technology to improve workplace training in the railway industry. Mr. Mboneni is currently completing Masters in Education with the University of Johannesburg. His dissertation addresses how blended education, the South African railway sector could improve employee productivity. He's sampling on the following professions in his career life. He was trained as an assistant, a train driver at Transnet Freight Rail. He then became a train driver, section manager, senior technical training officer, and he's currently a manager at PRASA. Mr. Mulaudzi, the platform is yours, sir. The time it's 11:52. You have 20 minutes, I think up to 23 minutes. Then we can start with your question and answers session. Thanks a lot, Mr. Mulaudzi. The platform is yours.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Can you be able to see me?
Yes, sir. We can see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share my screen. I'm not sure if you can be able to see my screen.
Yes, not yet, sir.
Okay. Let me start again.
Colleagues,
right. Hopefully you can be able to see what I have on my screen now, right?
Not yet, sir.
Okay. Okay, I'll start over again.
Please,
for the last time. Okay.
Please start over again, ladies and gentlemen. You are also encouraged to rate the speakers of this session on the polls right below the discussion, or the third tab from the bottom of the screen. Mr. Mulaudzi, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't see your presentation.
If I may interrupt, please.
Yes.
Stanley, would you like us to share your screen from our side, if that would help?
If you can do that, because I'm not sure exactly what is wrong. I thought I was sharing, but apparently.
Fantastic. We will do it, and you can just prompt our team to move to the next slide.
Okay, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for granting me the opportunity. And I'm grateful, Nozipo, for that introduction. In fact, I didn't want you to finish that introduction. It sounded so good. Can we just move to the next screen, please? Now, I am going to be talking about the topic that talks about using of technology in the railway space in order to improve workplace training. Now, my content, talks about the introduction, where I will introduce, the reasons why technology is important in education. And I will take you through the purpose, the research strategy, concept of blended learning, the use of WWW for blended learning, and then the need for blended learning and the benefit of blended learning. And then I will then conclude. Thank you. Okay, let me start off by, borrowing words from Benjamin Disraeli, who said, upon the education of the people of this country, the fate of this country depends. Now, if you scan through the training environment and you also scan through the workplace environment, you will then be able to see that the workplace environment is actually rapidly changing because of emergence technology and the internet, as the availability of the internet as well. Now, it is actually indisputable that training is actually the propeller of productivity in the workplace. Now, I don't know if many of you knows that in terms of technical education in the workplace, where did it start? But research shows that technical education in South Africa started in the railway sector. Now, which basically means that the railway itself is actually a trailblazer in the workplace training, which basically means that as training, we are trendsetters, especially in the railway environment. Now, South African railway operators depend deeply on the competency of its employees. Now, we must underline the words competency, because when we talk about competence and competency, we're talking about the acquiring of knowledge and also the acquiring of skills. Now, when we talk about skills and knowledge you are learning to be able to do, but then when it comes to skill, you're actually learning to be able to do. So combined, it basically means that you are actually going to be able to know what you are actually doing. Now, as technology is actually changing, training with technology should also follow suit. I actually liked what the Deputy Minister said yesterday when she says that in fact we need to actually use the most available and the latest technology in the railway, and also training should actually be the same. Now, investing in this type of technology where it is actually reliable, and then there's connectivity, then the learner management system that actually respond to the needs of the workplace training, then the South African Railway will actually play an important role in the future development of this country, which basically means that railway needs a sustainable low-cost training model that helps students to master the content and the skills of this country. Can we move on? Now, the purpose of this paper is actually to explore how a blended learning approach can be introduced in the transport sector with a view to improve worker competence. Now, in order to actually achieve this objective or this aim, it is actually necessary to state the following objectives. Now, the objectives are actually to determine how the use of blended learning improves workplace training in institution in the transport sector in South Africa.
Once again, your presentation is going to come up on screen, and we're going to ask you to continue with it. Sadly, we had prematurely ended the session, and we've had to restart it again. But the participants are all online, and the delegates, and are awaiting, of course, your continuation of the conversation. Over back to you, Mr. Mulaudzi.
No, thank you so much. I've already passed this stage, but let me continue from where I can be able to see the screen. Now, I was talking about the intent or the objective of the of this paper, and then I said it is to explore how blended learning approach can be introduced in the transport sector with a view of improving worker competence. In order to achieve this aim, it is necessary to state the following objective: to determine how the use of blended learning improves work training institution in transport sector in South Africa. Now, to establish the degree to which blended learning provide flexible and timely training to enhance and employee learning in the transport sector in South Africa, and also to encourage the transport sector to adopt blended learning to improve workplace training, to also improve worker productivity by empowering workers to use blended training tools, and then to carve out a model for blended learning for transport sector in South Africa. Can we move on? Now, the strategy of this paper was actually to, in fact, it is exploratory in nature and seeks to employ and present ways and means of transforming workplace training by adopting a model of blended learning. Now, the data was actually collected by means of administering questionnaire using probability sampling, which meant that everybody can have a chance to be selected. Now, the population was actually selected because we looked at the people that are conducting training, managers in the training, and the people that are actually affected, which are your safety critical grades, who then actually are responsible for actually attending the training themselves. Let's move on. Can we move on? Oh, okay. Now, let's talk about the concept of blended learning. I don't know if you heard when I was trying to explain that, but the concept of blended learning, in fact, it's the concept where you unite the traditional face-to-face technology with e-learning based on a new didactic opportunity of ICT and modern teaching means. Now, what does this mean? It means that you actually have two systems that are merging into one. For instance, in the olden days, we used to have what is called the brick and mortar, where the challenges were that for you to be able to be learning, you need to be in a class. And in a class, what will normally happen will be the concept of Mag and Jack theory, where you come into the class as an empty vessel, and the teacher or the trainer or facilitator comes and pour into your glass so that then you can be filled in with education. But then online learning in itself, the advantages are that it is self-paced and it enables you to do certain things. So when you combine all of those things, you simply say that you are mixing what is called traditional classroom studying and actually distance learning. Now, it involves the use of e-learning, mobile learning, classroom learning, and face-to-face instructions, which basically means that you're not only going to learn because you are in the class. You can learn even when you are outside of the class from anywhere. As long as you've got signal, you are able to learn. Next slide, please. Perhaps the next question is now, how did this start, and how do we able to utilize this thing? I mean, the idea of Wild Wide Web started in 1989, and then it developed in 1990, and then we are then able to use the internet to be able to learn. Now, the advent of website actually influenced education and training to actually invest in ICT education, so that you can then be able to go into the website and then be able to learn whatever it is that you can be able to learn. In fact, you can even have like free or open source softwares where you can be able to actually learn anything. Now, the web in itself, it changes both what we teach and how we teach. So basically, it has actually an influence on how learning actually takes place and teaching in itself takes place. Now, blended learning programs in itself actually include several forms of learning tools, such as real-time, virtual, and then collaboration as well, and self-paced web courses as well. Can we move on? Now, maybe the biggest question will be, why blend? What is the need? Why do we actually have to blend? Considering the fact that there is COVID that actually influenced the use, and social distancing, there is actually a very need now, a big need for blended learning, because it allows learning to continue virtually. Now, what does that mean? In fact, it means that you will then need blended learning, because you want to have what is called improved learning outcomes through alternative pedagogical approaches and increase access, which means that because in itself it serves as an added benefit due to emergence of geographical dispersed work environment. It means that personnel can go to wherever they want to go, but then it doesn't stop their learning, which basically means that they can be able to learn from anywhere in the world. And learning from anywhere in the world, it means that you can have a space, you can have time independency, and it also reduce cost, because when you look at blended learning in itself, I actually liked one of the speakers yesterday who said, we were talking about COVID-19 and the influence in their environment. I think it was Gauteng. But then again, COVID-19 in itself has actually made us discover that we actually know more than we thought we did. I mean, who would have thought during this time we'll be sitting here and perhaps having this type of a conference? It is because of the influence of innovation such as blended learning. Now, the approach itself actually have amplified the need for training development to take advantage of the opportunity that are afforded through improve personalization, collaboration, and communication, which is what I'm actually talking about. And then you look at the technologies that are there that can then be able to be utilized. I mean, you look at simulators, you also have to have things such as video. Now, let me explain a little bit about this. Now, if you look at simulators, it does not necessarily mean that you actually have to be physically in the simulator itself. So those are the things that you can actually be able to download even in your computer. And if you want to learn something that you actually don't understand, so you can practice over and over again. And in terms of the video, you can then be able to utilize the video. In fact, this is actually models that are called synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous basically means that everybody is in the class doing the same thing in the class, but asynchronous basically means that you are outside of the class. You can then be able to see a video later and be able to go into the space of learning at your own pace without any pressure from anyone. Now, the concept of blended learning in itself to improve workplace training in the railway industry should actually be given priority to actually improve learning productivity in this particular space. Let's go on. Now, the role of technology in the railway cannot be actually overemphasized because there are certain things that you can be able to see. I've spoken about train simulator. You can be able to see, if you look at this one, you can then be able to see that everything that a learner will be able to see in the screen and everything is exactly what is in your normal train. You can see there's a signal in front of you. Most of you maybe might know, but because we are all in the railway space, we know them as signal. And the interesting thing about the train driver is that one of the speakers yesterday also spoke about the type of a job that train drivers actually do, to say it's actually stressful and it needs your concentration. Now, here's the interesting fact. You will find that a train driver, even when he's sleeping in his sleep, can be able to dream about driving a train and even see the road, because they're actually required to learn the road from A to B, and then they should be able to tell you where are those particular signals are situated. But can you then imagine a situation where those innovations are actually utilized? Then you can be able to see that this is actually something that will make our learning be more easily accessible for everybody, depending on whether it does not make, depending on whether you have connectivity or not. Now you can also see the other train on the left side, which is actually in a real setup where you can then be able to see people in the platform. Can we move on? Now, let's talk about the benefits of blended learning. Now, here are the benefits of blended learning. What is it that it does? It actually saves time and it also saves money. Time in terms of, you don't have to take people out of the class for them to be able to learn. They can be able to learn even outside of the class, which actually saves money for companies that take people to to training that are not in the same geographical area. Now, it also gives you the ability to share, standardize, and reuse the content multiple times. Now, if there is something you miss outside of the class, then you can be able to learn and make sure that that content is actually reinforced. And then blended learning in itself can be self-paced, meaning that if you did not understand something, and if you don't have time to learn at this particular time, then you can learn at a later stage so that you continue with training. And then you get immediate feedback, because when you write assessment and you do exercises, and then you are able to get feedback after you have finished, and you can be able to see your mistakes and then be able to fix your mistakes without even having to go to actually a lecturer or a trainer. Now, it also reduces grading load for instructors. What does this mean? Is that the instructor can then be able to only go and take the report without having to go through and do quite a lot of paperwork, which sometimes in itself is actually a deterrent for quite a lot of things. And then it also lessened demand for classroom space. I mean, we are living in the COVID time. In fact, with this one, I actually like the phrase that was coined yesterday about embracing the new normal, which basically means for me now RSR has decided on being futuristic about this thing, because embracing the new normal, it basically means that you can embrace the new normal today, tomorrow, and maybe in 2030, it is going to be the new normal of that particular time. So it is also more flexible. It gives you more flexible scheduling for students and both the instructors as well, because they can decide that we can have a chat room at this particular time. Now, we can also, it also improve learning effectiveness as well, because you see, a learner can then be able to see when they're actually lagging behind, and the trainer can also see that I am actually having a learner that is lagging behind. Hence, you can be able to track the training process and a learner performance effectively. And now, in conclusion, now it can be concluded that blended approach has the ability to strengthen the training process. As a railway, like any other industry, find itself in an evolving knowledge-based world where the skills require actually constant update, which basically means that you cannot use yesterday's solution for today's problem, because today we have got different problems, and we cannot use them to solve yesterday's problem. I mean, you get to a situation where now, if you talk to people that have been in the railway space for quite some time, sometimes they've got the tendency of saying, you know, I have been in this environment and I've always been doing things like this, even when things have changed. So we basically have to have a situation where we need to find solution for the current problem. So hence we're saying, even with training, we need to have or adopt a blended or technology, a blended solution. Now, it is actually recommended that blending learning should be implemented in the following manner. Now, in the railway space especially, it is a space in which it is basically unionized. Now, because it is so unionized, you actually need to make sure that you widely consult with all the stakeholders, so that you don't have resistance when you want to actually implement this sort of training. Now, also create and review guidelines, blended learning guidelines. The reason for this is so that you have ways and means of being able to do these things, so that you are guided in terms of what you need to do in order to have blended learning. Now, you also need to assess the needs and capabilities of personnel that are actually working in that particular space, because when you introduce something that people can be able to have access to, it must be readily available. It must be something that you are able to actually break down into into consumable chunks where you are able to learn as and when you can at a very, very short time. And then ensure practical application and relevance. Make sure that, it is actually relevant to a particular job of a worker that is actually there and working. And then also create a community of educational developers, which basically means now you have to have your group of, let's say, curriculum designers or community of experts. In this case, we talk of, having different type of tribes. Now, we can have an online tribe where we are no longer confined to a geographical space, but in an area where all of us that are doing the same thing and all of us that are actually developers can then sit around the table, and be able to develop something that is meaningful and suitable for the learners. And then also make lessons and materials accessible on demand. Now, this is what we need to think about. We need to think about where we need to actually place these resources. So, and the best way to place these resources actually online, because that is where people are. We're putting things in a place where people are, and people can then be able to access that knowledge. Now, develop competencies with existing technology. And here I'm talking about affordances. Like you need to have devices that one can be able to utilize to be able to learn, because learning has to take place from anywhere in this world. I mean, you need to have devices that enable you to go through the learning material or the lesson, or even do the assessment. But not only that, try and develop technologies that will also be able to use with other phones that are not as good as the flashy or opulent or posh ones. Now, also provide adequate contact time, either face-to-face or online with students. I already explained the fact that some of the training can be synchronous, some of them can be asynchronous. And then don't force an unwanted program onto the employees, because then it will then be rejected, and all your effort of introducing technology in terms of training would have come to zero. Now, then familiarize end users with the tools they will need to access and participate in training, meaning that it does not help for you to have something that people are actually utilizing, but they don't actually know how it actually works. And then fit in training into a workflow. So, which basically means these things should actually respond to what the employees are actually working. So it should actually be relevant. It should work into what they're actually doing. And with all of that, thank you so very much for listening to me. My name, as mentioned, is Mboneni Stanley Mulaudzi. If you want to know more about this topic, we can discuss. I regard myself as an expert in this field, although this research is exploratory in nature. But thank you so very much. We can engage also even after this conference. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mr. Mulaudzi. I would like to apologize for the earlier on glitches on the technology side. I just want to emphasize that it is indeed that yesterday's solution can no longer be today's solution. We continuously need to innovate to remain relevant. In that, I am adding to what you've just said. We do have 2 questions that are posed to you. I will encourage everybody to continue posting their questions on the discussion panel, and Mr. Mulaudzi will then interact with you on that panel. The first question, Mr. Mulaudzi, is the old didactic way of face-to-face learning had a discipline component, and how do you discipline learners in a blended learning environment?
Yeah, you discipline learners by ensuring that they play the most important part in terms of training, and I wouldn't really regard the previous one as disciplined, because in that case you actually instilled fear, and you assume at that particular point in time that it is actually disciplined, because learners in this day and age, they don't come as empty vessel. They come with information, and if you are actually training them, you actually need to know your story in this day and age, because they will then be able to find out information. As you are training them, they have got gadgets. They can be able to, ensure that what you are saying is true or not. And they can then be able to reason with you, as opposed to learners of the previous days who will obviously encourages people to go and sit at the back of the class because they are afraid to be sitting in front, because you will then be able to point them out to answer a question. But to instill discipline nowadays is by ensuring that you track and trace and make sure that everybody is actually doing their part in terms of training. And because they can then be able to see that somebody else is tracking, and I can then be able to see that I'm lagging behind on my own, then I need to be disciplined. Discipline should not be something that somebody has to take a cane and administer corporal punishment, or it is something that has to be actually encouraged. Thank you. What is the next question?
Thank you, sir. Somebody is actually saying so true, Mr. Mulaudzi. Your next question is, what is a PRASA EMU train?
PRASA EMU train is an electric multiple unit train set that is very is something that is of high tech, which has got 6 coaches that are actually connected together, which the innovation and the technology in it is actually different from the previous ones, where from the previous ones you actually have to do a lot of work in it than you will do in this one. This one has got exciting things like buttons, and the way in which you operate your controls or your throttles is similar to when you having the joysticks on a plane. It is a train that once you sit in it, you feel that you don't want to actually have any other type of train that you want to travel on if you are a passenger. But if you are a train driver, you feel that you are actually on top of the world in terms of the capabilities and the technology that it is actually have. So it is actually a state-of-the-art train set. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Your next question is, how do you ensure that quality is not eroded when migrating to blended learning?
Yes, in fact, it's a very good question, and I'm glad that somebody actually posed that question. The quality of, education cannot actually be overemphasized, especially in this case. You ensure by making sure that there is actually a reliable connectivity. You have to have infrastructures that actually respond to all your plans. That is the first thing. But the second thing is that because it is a blended learning, you are able to utilize both the classroom, and you are also able to utilize both the internet, mobile learning. So which basically means that you ensure that it is not eroded by ensuring that whoever is taking the course is in a space where they are able to track themselves, and you are able to actually track them as well, to ensure that nobody is actually lagging behind. The good thing about blended learning in itself is that it allows you to still use the old model and combine it with the new model of training, but it actually gives you the opportunity as a learner to not stay behind, and to also keep on learning. The good thing about keep on learning is that you cannot be confined into a space where you will say, I cannot be able to go and do other things because I have to be able to learn in this time. What you do is you go into wherever you want to do. You can even go on holiday, and learn whilst you are actually on holiday. As long as you've got connectivity, it won't actually be eroded because it utilizes both.
Thank you. There's also another question, sir.
Okay.
Specific training relevant to each job needs to be refreshed periodically as a requirement. Introducing blended learning to trainings will assist in ensuring a more targeted training provision. How do you ensure that employees/trainees obtain the required training when they are against the methods of delivery?
Well, that is a very good question. Look, if you look at my last slide, I said that in terms of the recommendation, the implementation is actually very important. Now, you look at issues of making sure that you get everybody in board, get a way in which you can mobilize and then galvanize the learners to be able to adopt this way or this method of training. Now, this is basically what is going to be very important for a learner who does not want to actually buy into this thing. Take them through, show them what they can be able to do, but don't only show them the things that you want to show them. Ask them questions as to what is it that they would like to see in terms of what you're actually providing. I mean, for them, I will give an example of refresher training, for instance, because that is actually a targeted training, and in a railway space, that training has to take place every 2 years. Now, if you introduce personnel into Anil said mobile learning, into blended learning, they themselves can then take charge of their learning, and they can also be able to track their time that they have to be in training without having to be told by somebody who's sitting there to say, in terms of blended, in terms of refresher training, you are actually due in 2 or 3 months. They can be able to see that, because you then make the training exciting. And if you make it exciting, refresher in itself, they're not only going to refresh when they are supposed to go in class, but they can always refresh if they are confronted with a situation whilst they're actually, let's say it's a train driver or it's a technical person who's fixing something, but let's say a train driver confronted with something. Now they can easily access the learning material and go and see, how do I actually rectify this situation if it were to actually happen again. Or they can be able to, just for the sake of refreshing themselves, go around and play onto that particular simulator, or see a video of a train as to what is it that happens when somebody is about to commit a spade, or see anything that is actually related. So that in itself, it will actually influence the particular person who wants to actually go into this particular space, but actually have a bit of doubt. This is actually going to be very exciting in that, if all these affordances afforded, personnel can then be able to even have applications that of simulator in in nature, or anything else that will then be able to see what happens. In fact, I will give an example from the previous speaker who was actually showing us about the wheels and all of those things. I mean, you can go and check as to how do a train cross over from one line to another. So blended learning is then able to ensure you all of those, because without blended learning, it basically means that you have to go into a specific space where you're going to do or conduct practical training to see those. But with blended learning, you don't necessarily have to go there. You can go there, but you can be able to see from where you are sitting. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mulaudzi. Your presentation has been really been informative. In closing on your presentation, I can safely say learning never stops. We learn new things every day of our lives. Thank you, sir. May you have a blessed day and enjoy the rest of the day.